Hi guys, it's been a while since I last updated. What can I say? Summer is always a difficult time for filming for me because I usually prefer to spend my evenings on the balcony, like reading or just relaxing, and I prefer to spend my weekends outdoors. And then when I come home, I'm either too busy doing the chores that didn't get done earlier, or I'm too sweaty, or I'm just plain too tired. So, all in all, summer is just not the greatest time for producing YouTube videos, for me at least. It is always a great time for reading, though, and I did read a lot in the last couple of months. On my train trips that I took on my break from work, and on the train trips to and from the hiking destinations that I went to in the mountains, and just on the balcony, because that's just always such a treat to be able to read on the balcony in the summer months. But I'm not going to talk about everything that I read in this video. I'm just going to go through some highlights and or some noteworthy books that I read or that I started reading. So August, the reading month of August started out extremely promising. I had just finished a five-star read, which was The Book of Ettrick's Wolf by Patricia A. McKillop, which I talked about in the previous video, which I gushed about in that video. And immediately afterwards, I picked up and finished another five-star read, and two five-star reads back to back. That is practically unheard of for me. So I'm all the more glad about it and glad that I picked it up. And it was King Lear by Shakespeare. I almost can't describe, and certainly not in such a short amount of time, such as we have here, the absolute heartbreak that is this play about a classic situation of tragic blindness which wrecks the protagonist's life and the lives of the people around him. A play about the protagonist being his own worst enemy in an unfortunately extremely relatable and believable way. I usually, traditionally almost, enjoy Shakespeare's comedies more than I enjoy his tragedies. Or is it a history actually, King Lear? I don't know, but I enjoy the histories even less than I enjoy the tragedies. So the rule still holds. But this is one of the big exceptions from this rule, and I really recommend this for when you have a quiet time and really time to sit with it and let it work its sad magic on your heart. Completely opposite in mood, but also a great read, was a surprise discovery that I picked up and that I bought on one of my day trips during my summer break from work, on which I went to Bad Reichenhall, which is a town in southern Bavaria, which is very close to Salzburg in Austria. And in fact, the book is set partly in Salzburg, partly in Bad Reichenhall, because the protagonist is visiting the opera festival in Salzburg, but for reasons is staying in Bad Reichenhall in Bavaria, so in Germany, and he's crossing the border twice every day. And in fact, the book is called in German Der kleine Grenzverkehr. I would translate it as small scale border crossing, maybe, written by Erich Kästner, who is a very famous, very well known German author, or was rather, and set before the backdrop of the opera festival in Salzburg. The story of this book is itself a rather operetta like, somewhat farcical romance, but it's never over the top. On the contrary, I would rather call it understated for the kind of story that it is. It's an absolutely delightful short read, and I'm very glad that they had it on display in that small independent bookshop that I went to in Bad Reichenhall. It's been quite a while since I last picked up a book in a bookshop that I had never heard of before. And, well, what you know, sometimes those can be the best ones. Another book that I started reading in August but haven't finished yet is The Crossing by Cormac McCarthy, the second in the Border trilogy, of which All the Pretty Horses is the first volume. It's a very loose trilogy, though, and you definitely don't have to have read All the Pretty Horses in order to read The Crossing, but why wouldn't you read All the Pretty Horses? It's amazing. I definitely recommend reading this. And The Crossing is again about border crossing, this time between, I think it's Arizona and Mexico. In All the Pretty Horses, it was New Mexico and Mexico. But we are going back and forth anyway, and I think even back and forth between Arizona and New Mexico. But anyhow, this is very, very similar to All the Pretty Horses in theme. We have a young man, a boy really, from America, from the US, who has all these big dreams and aspirations or conceptions of the world that are very much a product of his upbringing in the US and with the American dream in mind, who then gets a reality check behind the border in Mexico. However, the true protagonists of the two books are extremely different from each other, and the situations that they get into are extremely different from one another. So far, I've read about half of The Crossing, and I can already tell that all the Pretty Horses is, I think, the better book. However, I think this one is even more, or for me, this one is more affecting, and I think it is more heartbreaking. All the Pretty Horses was a treat to read, but this one is really, really, I can feel this one in the marrow of my bones, which wasn't the case with All the Pretty Horses. I think that if you haven't read Cormac McCarthy before and you're a bit skeptical because of everything that you might have heard about him, I think if you picked up All the Pretty Horses, you'd be surprised. And now, again, for something completely different in tone, I picked up my first novel by Jón Kalman Stefánsson, which in the English translation is called Summerlight and Then Comes the Night, which seems to be a literal translation of the title because it's the same in German, Sommerlicht und dann kommt die Nacht. And this, because of this book, I think it's become a bit of a theme for me to be reading small town symphonies. Earlier this year, I read Dunkelblumen by Eva Menasse, which I have gushed about enough on this channel. But this one is set in a small town in Austria, and it really paints a broad picture, a panorama picture of the whole town. And this book does the same. And it's literally a symphony, or let's say a chorus, because the book is actually, the stories about the people in this town are actually told by the town collective. It's never really specified at any given moment who is in this collective and telling the story. It's always just we, the town. And just like a Greek chorus, in fact, a chorus in a Greek tragedy, the town comments a lot and interprets a lot the stories and the actions of the people that it describes. It was sometimes a bit much for me because I preferred not to get the interpretations of my books spoon-fed to me. I'd like to come to the conclusions myself, but it was certainly charming. And the title, Summerlight and Then Comes the Night, of course, already suggests what this is about. On a surface level, it just describes the natural conditions at the Icelandic setting at which this small town is set, with its long days of summer during which the sun never really sets, and then the long dark polar night. And of course, you can already guess the metaphorical meaning behind the service meaning, which is the joyful moments in life and the not so joyful ones. And the book is also about how we create joyful moments in order to keep the metaphorical darkness at bay, the dark night of the soul and the abyss. To be honest, I think that this theme could have been a bit more pronounced. I expected it to be a bit more pronounced, but I enjoyed it nevertheless, and I already bought Heaven and Hell, which is actually a historical novel set at, I think, the beginning of the 20th century or the end of the 19th century, also in Iceland. And I think I'm going to pick it up pretty soon because I'm really in the mood for more of this. Oh, and also, can I just say that German paperbacks are really just the perfect size. They're neither monstrously large, but like some of the English and American trade paperbacks, nor are they so small that the font size has to be microscopical, as with many mass market paperbacks. They are just the perfect middle ground, and they're just so nice and easy to hold, and I should really read more of them. Another maybe noteworthy book that I picked up is Minor Detail by Adania Shibli, here in the German translation. This was just released in paperback for the first time in the German translation. I think it came out in July. And I had been waiting for the paperback release because, well, to be honest, I had been hearing people in the English speaking world talk about this book for quite some time. It was translated into English much earlier than it was into German. But to be honest, I wasn't particularly interested in it for reasons that I talk about later. However, I became interested in it, or in buying it at least, about a year ago. A year ago, this book about the true story of the murder, or let's say the eventual murder, of a young Arab girl by Israeli soldiers in the Negev. This true story caused quite an uproar in the German literature scene because, well, Adania Shibli was supposed to be awarded an award for this book at the Frankfurt Book Fair last autumn. But then, just days before the event, if as much, they suddenly cancelled the awards ceremony. They let her keep the prize, but they didn't want to go public with it because they said that it would be inappropriate. And also, some people had told them that Adania Shibli was a nasty propagandist, and so it would be doubly inappropriate to award her a prize at the Frankfurt Book Fair last autumn. They were predictably roasted for this decision by their keynote speaker, the Frankfurt Book Fair's keynote speaker, who happened to be none other than Slavoj Žižek. And for some reason, people completely didn't expect him to roast them for it and were totally surprised and taken aback and went out of the lecture hall huffing and puffing, and it was all just an extremely embarrassing spectacle. And so ever since then, I had been waiting for the paperback release, and I was going to buy this book, even though I wasn't particularly interested in the story. And it turns out that the book really isn't for me. It has a bit of an introductory character into the situation in Israel, Palestine. This book is set partially in contemporary times, and it has a bit of an introductory character which for which I'm totally not the audience, because I worked for 15 years in a research project about the archaeology of the region, Israel and Palestine. So I'm kind of familiar with the situation and conditions there on the ground. So I didn't really need that introduction, and I didn't enjoy how this book was written, or maybe it was the translation. I don't know, but I didn't enjoy it. But different people might get something very valuable out of it. So I'm not recommending this book here. A book that I'm currently reading, that I picked up 2 train trips ago, is Hodd by Adam Thorpe, which is a Robin Hood retelling that purports to be an English translation of a lost Latin original. So, kind of like The Name of the Rose, it's even set at around the same time. And it is the real story of Robin Hood and the outlaws of Sherwood Forest, as told by, I think, an aged Will Scarlet. I think it is Will Scarlet, but I'm not completely sure. Anyhow, it's told by somebody who looks back on his youth from a really advanced age and is trying to shed light on what really happened in Sherwood Forest. This is quite ambitiously done, I think, and also very humorously done, the way that the narrator, who is the editor of this manuscript and the translation, the way that he weaves in those difficulties that come with a situation like this, where we have a translation of a lost original, which is also corrupt in many places. But he also redacts a bit and spares the reader some of the more boring excursions of the original author of the manuscript. And it is all very, it's done with, it's very tongue in cheek and done with a lot of almost self-conscious humor and meta humor, let's say. And I'm not quite sure if it's not really a tale that you get immersed in just because of the way that it is written, but it is definitely a book to be admired and appreciated, or maybe I would admire and appreciate it a bit more, I have to say, if it was a bit less like The Name of the Rose in quite a few aspects. But it's definitely one that I don't regret picking up. Another one that I picked up, but I'm not sure if I'm regretting it yet, is a book called Die Bergwacht, a German novel, obviously, which Bergwacht is mountain rescue in English. And mountain rescue in German is set up in much the same way as it is all over the UK, which is to say that it is done by groups of volunteers. So local mountain aficionados, except of course for the emergency doctors who are sometimes flown or taken up mountains to some search and rescue site. But in general, mountain rescue is organized or is done by groups of volunteers. And this one is set in a fictitious village in a fictitious valley near the southern Bavarian town of Garmisch-Partenkirchen, which is close to Germany's highest mountain, the Zugspitze. Unfortunately, this has turned out to be quite a, well, it's a novel about, which is very much about the setting. So it's very cozily set in a small town. In Germany, this kind of book has a name. It's called Heimatroman. And in Germany, for most people, this has a negative connotation, which is totally deserved, by the way. It is, these kinds of novels are extremely romanticizing of the small town setting and very cheesy, spend a lot of time on very romantic descriptions of the setting and the people therein and their traditions and everything. And well, I'm only about 70 pages or so in, and I'm already a bit bored by what seems to be like 12 mini excursions on each page about some local custom that isn't all that romantic in real life. I also feel like I can tell almost exactly what is going to happen. However, I was fully expecting it to be completely predictable story wise, so that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I was just very naively drawn in by the fact that this book is about mountain rescue, which is a topic that has been fascinating me for many years now. So I was completely drawn in, and also by the beautiful cover, I have to say. I just hope that the romanticization of the small town setting gets a bit less or less frequent the further we get into the story and the more exciting the adventure aspect of the story gets. Incidentally, I just visited Garmisch-Partenkirchen, so the town in the vicinity of which this novel is set. I've been there a couple of times, and this time it was to visit a very special place, and I think I'm going to leave you with some nice clips of this very special place. And I'll see you again soon with my next video. I promise it won't be as long a break this time, now that summer is over. Happy autumn reading, guys. I hope you've picked up some great, cozy, maybe even spooky books already this autumn. And I'll see you again soon. Bye.